Patty May, tell me, what is your role here at Konnect?
I'm the clinical director of Konnect, which means I design, set up, and operate the treatment portion of Steps to Recovery program.
What is treatment exactly?
Konnect serves people with primary substance use addictions. We also work with people who have depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, but the primary diagnosis needs to be a substance use issue, one where they're not in over a year or more of recovery. Our intensive outpatient program serves people up to 19 hours a week, 3 days a week. We have 3-hour groups. They also get individual treatment, opportunities to do job development, to do specialty groups like equine therapy, kayaking on the weekends. We're working towards some music and art groups to help them begin to build a much better, well-rounded life without their substance use. In the individual work, we do a lot of work with anxiety disorder or depression, which usually coincides with substance use issues.
The substances, is that simply drugs and alcohol?
Issues have to be primary alcohol or drug use to be the primary diagnosis. That doesn't mean that we don't deal with the process addictions. And what we find is people who complete the IOP program and drop down to outpatient treatment, which is less hours, we do start to look at the process addictions, which are just as debilitating as the substance use addictions, but are considered more in the mental health role.
Do you consider food a substance or a process?
Process.
Okay.
Process addiction to me is something you really can't get along without. Food, you have to eat. Relationships, you want those in your life. Yeah. Substances, meth, alcohol, for the most part, are health problems that you can get along without.
You said individual treatment. What's involved in that?
That's a really good question. Treatment is sitting down with a therapist or a peer support or a behavioral health worker. Those are the roles that we have here at Steps to help you sort through the stuff that keeps you from living a happy life. It's not like medical treatment where you go in and get a shot. As my clients love to say here, we do the uncomfortable work, not the hard work. And dealing with your feelings and dealing with the emotions that just seem to erupt once you've stopped using a substance, that's the uncomfortable work. And that's what we do in what we call treatment.
Do you work with families or significant others, or is you're primarily an individual?
We work with the individual and families if indicated, if it's part of the client's choice, if the family is willing, and if they want to be a part of the therapy. It's a client's decision whether they want family to come in or not, and we're always open to that. I think it's a great way to help somebody get through the struggles of being in a chemical dependency issue. Maybe in our future we'll have groups just for families to help educate what addiction is. We may offer classes or workshops on what is addiction to help other people understand what their loved ones are going through.
When we were coming in, I noticed that a group was just ending. What happens in groups? And is everybody required to go to a group?
In IOP, you're required to go to groups. That's the intensive outpatient program. Okay. That's the 3 days a week that can be up to 20 hours. And group is usually 3 hours. And in OP, we have a step down from IOP. There's a 2-hour group that you're required to do. But we have other people in outpatient treatment that don't do groups, that just do individual.
What do you work on in groups?
In group, we follow what they call evidence-based practices, which are a clinical term for things that have been shown to work. We work on 12 steps. Sometimes we do art, we do check-ins, we do music therapy, we do a lot of personal growth things in group, and we all do our own format of group. I would do group differently than some other therapists based on what we feel comfortable with, what we can bring to the client. And the group is designed on what the clients need.
I have heard some people who say they don't like the 12 steps. Is 12 steps a requirement here?
We are a 12-step program, but we don't say that there's only one way to do the 12 steps. We look at well-briety, we look at codependency, we look at smart recovery, we look at what seems to work for the client. But the purpose of a 12 steps is to help build structure, to look at what you need to do to move forward, and to recognize that You can't do this all by yourself. But 12 steps have been proven as a way to help people let go of addictions. I'm finding that what we don't really know is the 12 steps are the basis of so many evidence-based practices because of the way they structure. So yes, we do ask people to go to 12 steps, find a sponsor, and work the program.
I know some people who don't want anything to do with the God thing.
That's something that's growing and changing. I have a lot of people that don't let it bother them. I think sometimes it can be an excuse. The spiritual aspect can be difficult if people think it's a God religious thing, but if they recognize that it's a spiritually based program, that's a whole different ballgame.
So it's the difference between religion and spirituality.
Absolutely, that's my opinion. And everybody has their own opinion about that controversial subject, spirituality versus religiosity. You can make your way through the steps. I worked with a woman in Pennsylvania who was an atheist, didn't believe in anything but her inside self to help her through, and she spoke at meetings all over Pittsburgh, and it worked for her.
Where does kayaking fit in?
Social activities, fun, exercise, getting out there and feeling nature. As an addict, a lot of your social activities were finding the next bag, getting the next hit, connecting with the next person you could buy your stuff from, and going out and having fun in a sober way is new to a lot of addicts.
You mentioned earlier that this is a program for people who have been in recovery less than a year. Is that correct?
No, we have people that have been in recovery for more than a year. But to be an IOP, insurance dictates that. But I had somebody who is in IOP who spent 3 years in prison. All the recovery was based on incarceration. That person qualified for IOP because of that. So we look at what works best for the client.
You said that's what insurance requires. One of the things you're limited by, possibly in certain things, is what is required by healthcare insurance.
I hate to use the word limited. One of the things that I would like to say is that we work with the insurance to make sure that we're giving the client the best treatment they can. And most often the insurance companies will work with us. But sometimes if they feel that somebody has been extended to IOP way past what the insurance will cover, we have to look at that too. It's a partnership, a compromise.
I know that there's always possibilities in where you want to grow. What are some of the things you would like to see Konnect evolve into?
The day may come when we don't just have to start with primary substance abuse. We may be able to work with the wife of somebody who has had addiction and she's chosen to move on and needs some help for herself. I also think that in our future we're going to be offering trainings and information to agencies who know nothing about addiction. A lot of people don't realize that it takes 6 to 18 months to get past the post-acute withdrawal stage, which means you still might even look like you're using, but you're not. People accuse you and it gets difficult. So we want to be able to teach and train other agencies that are working with addicts a little bit about what it is like to be in an addiction.
What is the number one thing that you want people to know about Konnect?
Here at Konnect, and I think it's a part of Steps to Recovery, which was started many years ago by Damien as a sober living place, we celebrate people. We celebrate their successes. We celebrate them moving an inch. We celebrate them moving a mile. We celebrate them when they step back and come forth. We celebrate them when they leave and come back and say, I want to try again. We celebrate people. We love humans. We know that addiction is a human thing, and we want to support people being more humane and moving forward and knowing that they're celebrated. They're worth every minute of the time they give us.
What do you think makes your program stand out from others in the Verde Valley?
It's interesting because we're working on combining the 12 steps in clinical in a big way. That's really strange because clinical, you're not allowed to do certain things. You have to be very careful. 12-steppers, they just walk up to you and say, hey, stop that. Let's change things. We're pulling something together that's unusual.
That does sound unusual.
Yeah, it's fun.
Is it more
It's exciting.
confrontative?
Oh, no. It's more open. It's more human. It's more relaxed, but it's also allows us to be more human with everybody and not that clinical face that says, I can't move to the right or the left. It's open and relaxed and flexible.
Almost like a transparency.
Yeah, there's a transparency and an authenticity to our program that I think is unusual in clinical settings. I think it's because we really focus on both parts.
Is there anything else you want people to know?
You're welcome to come visit us. Come and look what we are doing. Recognize that we're a non-profit program. Many of the intensive outpatient programs are for profit, and we are completely non-profit. Everything comes from insurance or grants to keep us alive, and we want to stay non-profit.
What do your clients pay?
It depends on whether they have insurance or not. If they're living in the housing, they have to pay rent. That's a life skill they learn. As far as insurance, it's individual.
So there's not a requirement that says you have to come up with $200.
Well, housing. You're talking about housing. Housing is not Konnect. Konnect is the treatment part, and that's covered through insurances. Housing, they have to pay rent, just like you or I. We do find ways to help them through and get past the first few weeks while they may be job hunting. We can allow them to do some work at our store and our warehouse towards their rent. We're always looking for people who might want to sponsor a client or donate towards paying somebody's rent for the first month or so.
Okay. Anything else you want people to know? Do you want them to know you want people to know anything about your counselors? Do you call them counselors or therapists or
both?
Both?
Yeah. We're growing. We only have one full-time counselor. We just got several people certified to be peer supports, which are, it's funny, that's a 12-step thing, sponsors. And about 20 years ago, the population working with mental health jumped on this and decided to train people to be peer supports. If you want to know where peer support started, it's with the concept of getting a sponsor to help you through. So we have peer supports that have been through their own recovery program. We also have behavioral health technicians. Most of my behavioral health technicians are also peers. So the majority of the people that work here are peers and have their own experience with addictions of some sort.
Okay. Can you think of anything else?
We have this beautiful building. We have a store. We have a warehouse.
Why do you have a store? Let people know about that.
Okay, our store started years ago to support paying for people's rent and giving them a place to work. And it was a very big thrift store that had everything, and we honed it down to a nice little specialty store. We're going to have a big event center upstairs so we can host holistic things or clinical trainings or weddings to help support STEPS program. So we're expanding in a lot of ways.
In different ways. You mentioned in regards to the store, somebody who was working at the store to pay for their treatment. So it all comes together how to give support to people who are doing everything they can to stay sober.
And unfortunately, sometimes people are asked to leave because they may be doing one part, but they're not paying their rent. We have to look at all of that. And so it's not easy for us because we're going to say, oh, come on in, we'll stay forever. But we have to watch. And that's not helping anybody learn how to live in the real world. We really are supporting people and learning how to be adults and how to live in a world that expects things from them and that they need to be accountable for. And addicts are brilliant people. You may not think that, but they've managed to get through stuff that you never thought anybody could get through under the radar. We're teaching them to step forth, be accountable, and be grown up.